the DAWbench Radio Show, the official podcast of DAWbench.com.
Welcome to the DAWbench Radio Show. I am your host, Curigliano of AAVIM Technology in Melbourne, Australia. And I am joined again today by Pete Brown of Microsoft in Maryland in the United States. How you doing today, Pete?
Good, Vin. Good. We're enduring some of the Canadian smoke sending its way down here, but otherwise everything's been good.
Right. Yeah, there's some fires in south of France as well at the moment. Now, before we get too sidetracked, we have a very special guest today, and that is Roger Linn, who is a leading-edge music tech engineer, instrument designer, and pioneer who was the founder of Linn Electronics and the designer and developer of the first sample-based drum machine using real drum kit sounds. He's currently the founder and owner of his new company, Roger Linn Design, that has continued to develop unique and innovative instruments and music technology products. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome, Roger. You're most welcome. Now, look, I would hazard to guess that the vast majority of the people listening in today would be very aware of your early products. And, those initial drum machine designs spawned a whole genre of electronic musical instruments. And the influence of those initial designs still continue to today with a lot of the modern music technology products. So to say that you had an impact on the industry would be an understatement, I would say, Roger.
Yeah, or as I like to put it, I'm the guy that's responsible for removing all the humanity and human interaction from music.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but those drum machines of yours, they were definitely revolutionary. Because we've spoken to a few music tech pioneers, and it's always come up, what was revolutionary, what was evolutionary. I mean, what you brought to our industry was definitely revolutionary for the time. I think what would be a great start would be if you could give us an overview of your personal history with music, computers, and technology, and your eventual journey to founding Linn Electronics in 1979, and then we can just take it from there.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I grew up in Los Angeles, and my dad was a professor of music at the University of Southern California, USC, or as some people call it, the University of Spoiled Children. And my mom sang light opera and played piano, so there was a lot of music in the house.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, when I was about 8, I started taking guitar lessons, and because guitar was the instrument of the day,
mm-hmm.
and was very passionate about it. And then, of course, when at the time when the Beatles were around, I started trying to learn Beatles songs and such. But also, during that time, I was fascinated with science fiction and electronics and all the inventions that were starting to happen at the time. It seemed like magic to me. There's that quote from Arthur C. Clarke that any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic.
Yes,
and for
yes.
a young boy growing up in the 60s, it was definitely magic for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had these two passions. One was music and one was technology, and particularly the effect of technology on art. And so I merged them together. When I was playing guitar, I had all kinds of pedals, and I would do circuit bending on them and learn about electronics. And eventually that learned to me making little inventions of my own just for my own use. And just that grew into making my products. And so when I was, I started Linn Electronics when I was 23. And that's when I made, and then a few years before that, I've been working on making a drum machine that was programmable because most of the drum machines at the time just played preset beats. There were two rock beats. One was boom, 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 and the second one was boom, boom. So that was your choice. There were your two choices back then. But at any rate, I wanted to make something that was programmable, and then later on, I had read some technical papers about sampling of audio onto tape digitally, and it occurred to me to if I could just store one sample of a bass drum or a snare drum and such in ROM memory, that may not be so expensive that it would be unaffordable to make this for a drum machine. And then I would write a sequencer in code that would say play bass drum, play snare drum, play hi-hat, play bass drum, bass snare drum. And so that's what evolved into the drum machine. So anyway, I worked on that, and then I founded my company to make that. And then there was the first product. It was called the LM-1 drum computer. And then the second one, a couple of years later, was the LinnDrum, and that added some features. It was bigger, better, or not bigger, but better, less expensive. Then there was one called the 9000. And then my complete lack of business acumen caused my my company to go out of business, even though I had a successful product in '86. And that's when I was contacted by the Akai company. And they said, you are Mr. Drum Machine. Let's make a drum machine.
Right.
I said, okay, that sounds good to me. And so we made the MPC 60. And that was a drum machine and sequencer in one product. And that worked out very nicely because they got to do all the stuff that I was lousy at, the business, the finance, the marketing, the sales.
Yeah.
And I just got to make the stuff.
Yeah.
So it made a lot of sense for both of us. So the 60 was followed by the MPC 3000. And then Akai, the Japanese company Akai, decided that they didn't like paying me my royalty on the sales of the products.
Right.
So they tried to get out of it, and eventually they were having financial problems and they went under. And so I didn't get those royalties anymore. But I then started my own new company, Roger Linn Design, and the first product was a guitar pedal called Adrenaline.
Yep.
And what it did was to take a lot of the things that I enjoyed about modular synthesis, sequencers, sequence filter tones, and running instruments through that, and made them into something simple that the guitar player can just select a preset with or program his own. So I made that, and then I made a few other things too along the way, but most notably there's that, and then I made a drum machine with Dave Smith called the Tempest. That took his analog expertise. He was Mr. Analog. I was Mr. Drum Machine, so he made an analog drum machine.
Yeah, of course.
And then lately, I've been 10 years ago. I made an instrument called the LinnStrument, and that's what I continue to sell right now. And what this is an instrument that brings the expressiveness of acoustic instruments to electronic sound. And the reason is because I noticed that. Synthesis wasn't being used for the foreground anymore. It was all background. And that only singers were getting the background. There were no more instrumental solos in pop records. And I figured it's because people were making music with on-off switches. So the LinnStrument is my attempt to change that because it captures all your subtle movements in 3 dimensions, as a violinist would for vibrato or a guitarist would for bending strings, things like that. And so that's what I'm doing now. And that's a quick summary of what that's my life. That's my life story right there.
Oh, Vin, we're all done. So that was the whole podcast right there. Yeah.
Here we go. We can wrap it up. Look, if I may, can we roll back, because there's some pretty interesting backstory to some of this history. And look, the majority of us would be well aware of the LM1 and the LinnDrum and its influence in those early 80s, pop rock genres, especially, for me, Prince was one of the artists that really signified the sound of those early drum machines. There were other artists, but I remember Prince predominantly was a huge fan of the LM1. And one of the interesting things with Prince for me was that he never used to have hi-hats in the music. I don't know if anyone else, if you've noticed that, Roger or Pete, but if you go back and listen to those hits in the early 80s, there's a kick and a snare, there's some toms, and he's got some kind of percussion type of stuff going on. And I read enough interviews to know that he really liked the LM1 because a lot of the individual instruments are tunable, so he could sit there and mangle them up a little bit. But if you go back and listen to those, whether it's Purple Rain or any of those kind of early 80s hits, there's no hi-hats. But the thing is, once you notice that, you can't unhear it. You kind of go, where are the hi-hats? It was
right.
And while I was researching the show, one of the specs for the LM1 was no cymbals. I'm thinking, hang on, there's no hi-hats on the LM1? Is that why Prince didn't have any hi-hats? Then I've kind of discovered, no, there are hi-hats in the LM1. So
hi-hats or cymbals, Vin?
No cymbals, but there were hi-hats.
There was hi-hats, and I think, was there a ride as well, Roger?
No, not on the LM1. The LM1 had no ride or crest cymbals.
There you go.
Had the hi-hat.
Yeah, so initially I just thought, well, that's why he didn't have hi-hats in the LM1. And then I've since discovered, no, that was actually an artistic decision of his, that he just didn't have.
Well, he did have hi-hats, as I recall. Maybe they were just mixed down.
Yeah, well, you go back and listen to some of those early 80s hits. Very predominantly, if the hi-hats were in there, they were not. They were not predominant, in the mix. Now, one thing that if you don't mind, I'd love for you to tell us about. You had an original prototype. Was that the cardboard prototype of the drum machine?
Well, there could be two things you're talking about. Number one is I originally, before I made the LM1, I made a programmable drum machine based on a computer I had, an early computer called a Compal 80.
That's the one.
And for that, what I did was to this early computer had what was called an S100 bus. This was the common the backplane that allowed expansion. And in my computer, I had a CPU card, and I had 3 whopping 8 kilobyte memory cards for a total of a whopping 24 kilobytes of RAM.
Yeah.
And there was one slot open on the top. And I got a hobby board that allowed you to wire whatever you want onto this. And then I called up, at this time I wasn't thinking about sampled sounds. So I called up the Roland company because they had an office in Los Angeles. And I said, I'd like to buy a drum sound generator from this particular drum machine because it had pretty good sounds, even though they were analog sounds. And so I went down to Roland and I bought this from them. And then I figured out what signals it needed, electrical signals. Mm-hmm. And I wired them up to this board that was in my S100 bus computer, and then wrote code that would send messages out, say, play the Roland bass drum, play this Roland snare drum, and had a sequencer on the screen that showed a grid, and the columns were 16th notes, and the rows were different drums. And so you would use the cursor keys to move a little blinking cursor around the screen. Then you hit the space bar to put a drum in that particular place in the matrix. And that allowed you to program your own beats. But they were still just the sounds of the Roland drum machine. And that particular prototype, if you go to my website, under the other menu, you can select museum and you can see it there.
Yes,
there's some pictures of it.
Yes. And
that one right now is in the Musée de la Musique in Paris, in the Cité de la Musique.
Right.
But it's not on display. I'm not important enough for that. It's down in one of those rooms that looks like the scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right, in the basement there. Yeah. Amazing. And you used it on an album from Leon Russell in 1977.
Yeah, I had worked for Leon Russell when in my late teens until about 21, 22, as a guitar player and recording engineer and just general nerd and gopher.
Right. Yeah.
So when he'd go on the tour, I'd play guitar, but he knew all the best guitar players that much better than I was. So he would use them on the records, and then I'd just cop their parts on the road. But I was very passionate about all the electronics that he had. And it was a wonderful arrangement because whenever I saw something in a magazine, a piece of new gear, I would get excited and I would convince him he needed to buy it so I could use it. It was a wonderful arrangement, basically.
Yeah, why not? He can fund your passion. I read about the history of that, and I went and searched out some of those songs on the Leon Russell album, and I found the title track, and it didn't have any drums in it. I went, oh, hang on, I'm going to have to keep. It was just piano and vocal, unless I didn't listen enough of the song. But I ended up finding it, and I heard the drum sounds, and I went, yeah, okay. They weren't as impressive.
They were the Roland drum machine.
Oh, is that what they were?
Which
yeah,
were pretty good for synthesized sounds.
Yeah. They weren't as impressive as your LM1 sounds. Put it that way.
It's funny, Vin, you went out searching for the actual album with the stuff on it. I went out searching for the compile to see what the heck it looked like as a computer at the time. So,
there you go. Yeah. And apparently you had a cardboard prototype as well. What was that one, Roger?
Well, that was an actual prototype, early prototype of the LM1 drum computer, my first drum machine.
Right.
And so what I needed to do was to get money.
Yeah.
So I was in LA. I knew a lot of musicians, and so I had this prototype, and it was basically a cardboard box, as you say, and it had the circuit boards in it, but not mounted in any chassis or anything like that. And so I would show it to people and say, "Oh, I'm going to have this ready in 3 months."
Yeah.
And could I have a 50% deposit towards a $5,000 machine?
Oh, sure.
And US dollars, of course. And now you have to understand, $5,000 in 1979 was the equivalent of around $18,000 or $19,000 today.
Yeah, of course.
So this is a whole lot of money, and I'm showing up at these musicians' studio and basically presenting it to the artists they work for, whoever it was at the time. And but they were this was a prototype that actually did have the sampled sounds in it.
Right.
And so I'd show them, I'd press a button on this circuit board that was part of this cardboard box, and they'd hear a real snare drum there. And it was this same sort of a moment of magic that I described earlier.
Yeah.
They would feel there was something magic in this because they could press a button and hear a real snare drum, or a bass drum or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I collected a number of $2,500 deposits, and then starting about 7 months later, I actually delivered the first units.
Now I'm a car guy, so is it true you sold your Porsche to finance the project?
Well, first of all, Porsche would suggest that I had a lot of money. This was a Porsche that at the time I bought that was 13 years old.
Yeah.
And it was one of those old bathtub Porsches. It was called the Porsche 356B, which I got because I thought, boy, girls will really be impressed if I have a Porsche, right? But when you have a Porsche it was breaking all the time because it was old. And I called it the PH, the prestigious headache. And so at one point there was a guy who he laid out my circuit boards for me. I did the schematics, but I didn't know how to lay out circuit boards. So this guy laid out the boards for me. And I was always running out of money, and I had gotten another car, or was about to get another car. So I told him, I said, "Hey, how about this? Instead of me paying you, would you like to take this Porsche?" And he said, "Yeah, sounds pretty good to me." So he took the car.
Awesome. So with the LM1, and I don't want to kind of go through every instrument, or else we'll be here for 4 hours. But the LM1, that obviously kickstarted the whole drum machine, or the sampled drum machine genre, and there was it did, cause a bit of a rush directly after that. Can we just spend a minute on the LM1?
Sure.
There was a friend of session drummer friend of yours, Art Wood, that sampled all of the sounds. Can you just give us a quick overview of that process? And did he actually program the beats as well into the unit?
Well, Art I'd known for quite a while. He was an old friend, and we'd been in high school bands together and such. And he was a very good drummer. And he played, for example, with Gary Wright, who was a guy at the time, had a song called My Love Is Alive, with a lot of synths.
Is that the Dreamweaver guy? It was it?
Dreamweaver,
yeah,
that's what it was. That was his most famous song.
Yeah.
And but anyway, Art had also played. He had toured for a while with Peter Frampton, who was very popular at the time, and some other artists. So anyway, I asked him, could you come over to? I'd like to record your sounds, some drum sounds in this, and he was happy to do so. And basically, I just had I put up a mic. I think it was a Shure SM57 in one of my closets in my house, and put Art into the closet, and the drum was set up there. And he tuned his drums very well. And so I took a few strikes. I said, "Thank you, Art." And that was it. And then he came out of the closet.
He would have been looking at you, going, "Well, is that it? You don't want me to play any beats?"
Well, yeah, the sessions are kind of funny. When people often say, "Oh, that sounds so great. That must have been this famous drummer or that famous drummer." But, you're really striking the drum once, so you just know how to strike a drum well and you tune the drum well.
Yeah, of course.
And that's really it's all that's needed. So you don't really need to have the world's greatest drummers to strike the drum once.
It's still cool that you did get someone that was, so good at his craft to do it for you, though.
You also asked me about Art programming some of the beats in the machine. And Art did help with that. He made some of the beats. And in particular, he made, we had a demonstration recording. And at the time, of course, there was no internet, but they had these things called Evitone sound sheets. And they were little plastic flexible sheets that you would put on your record player. They were about the size of a 45 single, except they were, a single, there was a single song, except I think they were actually square, and they would just revolve on your turntable. And they were so flimsy that it instructed you to put a quarter, a few heavy coins on the thing to keep it down. At any rate, so I made a recording on this, and what the recording was is something that Art had programmed into the LM1, which was the drum solo from, oh God, what's the guy's name who was the drummer for Tower of Power? I've forgotten. Who's an incredible drummer, and he had this intro part for a song that was incredible. Well, Art copied the whole part and programmed it into the LM1, and so we put that on this Evitone sound sheet as an example of what the LM1 can do.
Right.
And in a typically stupid way, I didn't credit the actual fellow, the drummer, who was incredible. But I saw him later. I remember at a club, I happened to bump into him and thanked him very much for providing the excellent drumming that we used for that.
Right.
So that's David Garibaldi.
Dave Garibaldi, that's it. Incredible drummer, yeah.
There you go. And it's is it true there's only about 500 of these LM1s?
Yeah, well, once again, they were in today's dollars, they're about $18,500. So they were all in important hands. I mean, the first one, Leon Russell wanted to get one, so he got one for him. Herbie Hancock wanted one. Stevie Wonder, Gerald Dragon of the Captain and Tennille.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And God, who else? And I know I didn't even know when one went to Prince. At that point, it went through a dealer or something like that, and I never met the guy.
Yeah.
It's a good thing nobody popular used it, right?
Well, Prince was essentially my marketing department. I didn't know how to do marketing or sales, but fortunately the word spread so fast that people just wanted to buy these things, and pretty soon we couldn't make enough to meet the demand. Yeah. But Prince was incredible. He used it on every record, and they became such hits. And they were such an essential part of his sound that he was extraordinarily helpful to me.
Well, they call it the Minneapolis sound,
yes, exactly right. Where Paisley Park is.
Yeah, of course. Now, interestingly, with the LM1 and its legendary status, I couldn't even imagine what an original unit in good condition would be worth nowadays, Roger. I mean, would they ever pop up for sale?
Well, there was one, somebody sent me an ad on, what's the used exchange
reverb,
and he was asking $40,000
yeah.
for it. My first thought was he'll never get it. And the second thought was, what idiot would pay $40,000 for that?
Yeah.
Particularly, it's so funny because people talk sometimes about how special it is to have an early prototype. Well, if you've ever engineered and produced a product, the last thing you want is an early prototype. That's the one that's used to basically work out all the mistakes.
Yeah.
But And my engineering company knowledge had holes in it, and so the first ones had unreliability problems. We made them all work, and we do upgrades and all that sort of stuff. But you could say that LM1 was sort of a prototype for what came after. It had no cymbals. The ones that came after had more features and such. So, but Prince, even when the LinnDrum came out subsequently, Prince didn't like it. He wanted his LM1. Yeah. And I think the main reason was because it had individually tunable drums, which the LinnDrum didn't. Yeah,
that's what I've read as well. And apparently he tracked it down and bought it secondhand, but paid some enormous amount of money.
Did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, whether the story's true or not, but apparently he didn't get one from the first batch, and he was desperate to find one, and he found one and paid some exorbitant amount of money over the top of what.
I guess we know who's paying $40,000 for one. So yeah.
Look, some of the price of the analog stuff. Pete. We've already spoken about what my Jupiter 8 will be worth now, and I'm having a heart attack. But
you just had to throw that in there. I understand.
I did. Yeah. Well,
that's one thing that's so funny. I can understand that people have a particular romantic attachment to old analog synthesizers. I don't, but they think it has a special sound. But early digital, an old bit is the same as a new bit.
Yeah,
and nobody is paying $40,000 for the first Panasonic cassette recorder or early digital recorders. Early
the comments are going crazy.
Yeah, they're going crazy.
There's somebody madly typing in the comments right now about old bits and new bits and gold cables and the whole thing.
Yeah, there's all the Synclavier owners are now having half a coronary, and they'll be typing madly away.
Yeah.
Now, one just last point on the LM1, and I found this very, very interesting, is that, and there's someone that's very local to you, who is an engineer in other fields, got a hold of an LM1 and decided to do some improvements on it. A guy called Joe Britz.
Joe's a good friend of mine.
That is look. I had a read through of the history, and then I watched the videos and stuff. That is an amazing accomplishment of what he did. So he took your original, and then he.
It's a funny story. Joe's a friend of mine. He's actually here in Silicon Valley. He's a CEO of a tech company called Affero.
Yes.
They make the entire software stack for all the Internet of Things products that are sold by Home Depot and other companies.
Yes.
Very, very smart guy. Anyway, before he knew me, he had gotten hold of an LM1. Someone gave him that had it for years or something like that. But he really loves old gear and the gear that was used to make the music of his earlier years. And so he started playing with this thing and taking it apart and looking at the circuitry. And Joe's a very accomplished engineer, a very, very smart guy. And he reverse engineered it. He actually drew up schematics from it because he had gotten some schematics, but they weren't complete. And he re-engineered this thing and made new circuit boards that were properly designed instead of the ones that I had made. And he made his own LM1. But he thought, then I'd like to add MIDI, I'd like to add USB, I'd like to add all these different features and a display on it and the ability to change sounds, which I couldn't do at the time. And so he did it in a very creative way. He added this sort of a computer overlord, which would grab the system bus without affecting anything that made the sound, because he wanted to make sure it had the exact same sound. And he used those same old, horrible 8-bit DDA converters at the time, the ULAW DDA converters that were used by AT&T for phone transmissions.
Right.
And so it got that exact same horrible sound, that exact same amount of distortion from 8 bits, same from that horrible 28K sampling rate. But he was able to, with this overlord computer, when he wanted to add a feature like loading in new sounds over USB, he would grab the bus, take control of it, and load them in, and then just release it, and it would still be an LM1 at that point.
Yeah.
It's kind of a modern version of what you did with the Compal with the Roland sounds.
Well, except there was no overlord. It was just one computer doing everything.
Yeah.
But anyway, here's the funny thing is I got to know Joe after he made this, and he was telling me that I said, what was the process of making this? And he said, well, it took a few years, and I just really enjoyed it. At my company, I work hard, and I'm dealing with all this company business issues. But at night, I wanted to just do something relaxing. So I would sit on the sofa with a glass of wine and just reverse engineer your drum machine. Now, to me, the idea of reverse engineering a 1980s product is like getting a root canal.
Yeah.
But Joe, we all have different values. And I told this to Joe, and he jokes about it. But he really did a great thing. So anyway, he only did this for fun, just to make it himself as a process.
Yeah.
The reward is in the journey. And then there are a couple of friends of his, Andre and Devin, a couple of engineers, and they said, hey, why don't we make a handful of these things and sell them? And so they, and I had already met Joe at this point, but I said, go ahead and do it, because I know there's only a certain number of people who are willing to pay for this thing. And I think they sold about 100, 150 of them, something like that. And I said, that's fine. Use the sounds, do whatever you want with it. Because I was flattered that he did that, and Joe made no money from it. And Andre and Devin didn't make much money. It was what I call subsistence engineering.
Yeah.
But they had fun with it, and it was nice to see, for people who valued that old drum machine, that there was something they could buy that actually had the same sounds and feel, because it was electrically the same exact machine with the same sounds and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's that unit, if anyone wants to search it out, is called a Luma 1, Luma-1.
Well, and the reason for that is Joe named it after his dog Luma, which is this really sweet white golden Labrador.
Yeah.
And every Wednesday night now, I meet Joe and some other friends at a pizza place, and he brings his dog, and another friend, Nate, brings his Bernese Mountain Dog, and they're just really sweet dogs. And so there's a dog park near there. I meet him first at the dog park, and I see Luma, and I call out Luma, and Luma just runs toward me, and Luma's really muscular and just about knocks me over, kicks me in the nether regions,
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's a great dog to name a product after.
Yeah, and all of those the fellas that were involved with that, very respectful. I mean, I've from what I've read and what I've watched, they were very, very respectful of the original designs, and I mean, they even asked your permission, which is kind of, I don't want to go there, but that's kind of a rarity nowadays, where people just think, well, hang on, this is an old kind of device.
Well, yeah, Joe's an honorable guy. He wouldn't do it, and he had respect for me. He wouldn't do anything about my permission. And like I say, he didn't do it originally to sell it; just did it as a fun project. He just enjoyed the process.
Yeah. So there you go, amazing. So look, and again, we could go through each instrument, but the LinnDrum was essentially the next machine. Now, that was far more popular there. You sold about 5,000 of those, if I'm correct. So can we just touch on the Linn 9000, because that, again, is another one of those revolutionary products, at least for me, because that design is still continuing today with instruments that look, the layout looks identical to what you came up with in, where are we, 1984. Geez, I didn't even realize it was that early. So the Linn 9000, what was the thinking behind that? So you had the drum machine, and then you decided to add multi-track MIDI sequencer. Now, was there a sampler as well?
Yeah, you could sample your own sounds. And it had a multi-track MIDI sequencer.
So you had instrument samples as well, like, keyboards and that.
Well, it was intended that the sample, because it was limited, sampling time at the time, because computer memory is expensive. So the idea was that the samples were mainly for drum sounds, but you could sample in a pitch sound, then play it at different pitches and such.
Oh, you could, right? Okay. Right, and then
it's not like having today's sample players that have multi samples of a piano at different velocity levels and pitch ranges and all that stuff.
Right.
It was basically just one sound that you could tune it, but it was mostly intended to sample drum sounds. And the idea was for keyboard sounds, you'd run out through MIDI to your MIDI synthesizer, and it would record those parts.
Gotcha, 100%, right. And so that was, I suppose, the genesis of the later products that came with your affiliation with Akai. I didn't realize the first MPC 60 was 80s, because I mean my first I mean, I had been in front of, and I came across the MPC, probably a 60 Mark II, would have been early 90s, but I was definitely in front of MPC 3000s a bit because we had them in the Pro Audio store that I worked at. I distinctly remember those quite well. So that MPC 60, that had far more sampling capability. Was that more, did that give you more capability as far as instruments as well, or was it still primarily a drum sampler with sequencing that would drive the other instruments?
The MPC 60, the biggest feature it had over the Linn 9000 was that it was reliable because I didn't design the hardware.
Right.
The Linn 9000, unfortunately, actually, I one of the reasons it was unreliable is I didn't design the hardware. The LM1 and the LinnDrum I designed myself, hardware and the software. And then I decided at that point, if I want to be, I need to be a real company now. I need to hire other engineers to design this stuff. And so I hired in a team of people, and they designed the 9000 to my specification. I drew up all the screens and the where the controls would be and the functions and how they work, but they wrote the code. And it didn't turn out very well. And Linn 9000 ultimately, to be honest, is what brought the company down because it was so unreliable. We had to repair all these units, and it was just a lot of mistakes on my part. But so that's once the company went down and went out of business in 1986, early 1986, I was contacted by Akai, and before my company had gone out of business, I was working on essentially a replacement for the Linn 9000, which is something called the LinnDrum MIDI Studio. Mm-hmm. And it was designed by other engineers I brought in that were far, far better. Unfortunately, they were also far, far more expensive. And the sales of the Linn 9000 at the time weren't enough to pay all the bills of the salaries that I had, the good people I had there. And the LinnDrum MIDI Studio wasn't yet ready to ship. So ultimately, the company went down. But when Akai approached me, they said, hey, we'd like to make this LinnDrum MIDI Studio and with a few changes. And I said, no. By this time now, there's better technology. So what they did instead is they took the sound chip from their S900 sampler, which is a 12-bit sampler, yep. And then we worked out a product. And I drew out the design, and this one was a new product. And it did take some of the technology, like the touch-sensitive pads from the 9000, but I had found better ways to do that using force-sensing resistors. And so there were a number of improvements. I said, let's make a machine for today that would really do well in the market, right? So I drew up pictures of it and sent it to them, and then a product description and all the sorts of details and such. And then I would go to Tokyo and meet with their engineers, and we work out all the details. And ultimately that resulted in the MPC 60. And they made a custom sound chip, which was a derivative of the S900 chip. It had some new features to it. And that was actually designed by a very bright guy named David Cockerell, an Englishman who had designed the EMS synthesizer of the 70s. Yep. And some other ones as well. So, this is a team sport. It takes some bright people. And so David did that sound chip, and my team in LA wrote all the software. And it worked out very, very nicely. And I think one of the reasons is, first of all, I was not doing any business. And I wasn't designing all the hardware details like the computer circuit and all that sort of stuff. But the parts that were important, I was involved in the design. And mostly my team did the software. And I was very passionate about getting this right, particularly after my company had failed. And right. So I'm proud of the MPC 60, what it did. And then the follow-ups, the MPC 60 Model 2. And then the MPC 3000.
The MPC 3000 is it says the first MIDI production center. So and I'm looking here at the specs. So you had 6 minutes of sampling.
That's what MPC stood for, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So you had that looked like MPC 3000 was a full-blown sampler by that point, by the look of it.
Yeah, the MPC 3000 and the 60 were intended for sampling drum sounds.
Yep.
You could record in like a sound of a bass guitar and then play it at different pads at different pitches. Right. But it's not the same as what people are doing with samples of the time, where you had different pitch ranges, so it didn't sound like Munchkins if you went too high.
Right. Okay. So it was still primarily a rhythm sampler, a drum sampler.
It was primarily a rhythm sampler, but once again, a MIDI sequencer.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. And one of the things that I really tried to do is one of the original concepts of the even the first LM1 was loop recording with quantization, which, by the way, I invented. I invented quantization and swing tuning.
Yeah.
It was in the LM1. And to do that with loop recording, so for example, you hit a beat, you create a beat and it loops around and it's still playing, then you add drums. But if you were to, for example, hit a snare drum where a snare drum was before, it would replace that one with the new one at the new velocity that you intended. Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't get a flamming sound if two things were at the same spot, for example. Mm-hmm. But all these little details were very important to me. And so that idea of loop recording followed through into all the products, including the MPC-60. And the MPC-60, once again, I really made sure that the software worked well for that loop recording with quantization and swing. Quantization I called timing correct, and swing I called shuffle.
Right. Yes.
And I like how you just kind of toss those in there just very gently, but like that's the base of every drum machine that we listen to today. So like everything has to have quantization, it has to have shuffle or swing or something like that, and the loop recording. So yeah, thank you.
And that was partly one thing I learned from Leon Russell, because he had taught me a lot, actually, but he taught me when I was working with him that different drummers have different levels of swing. And so I just figured in software, if I just delay every alternate 16th note, that creates swing, and you can set it exactly as how much swing you want. And it was a valued feature.
Yeah, right. Just gives it a bit more of a humanizing the
exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's fast forward now to Roger Linn Design. So between 94 and when did you start Roger Linn Design? 2001. So you kind of had a bit of a...
Well, the first thing I did in the late 90s with Roger Linn Designs, I made a software update for the original MPC-60 and MPC-62.
Right,
that
awesome.
Added some features. The features that were added to the MPC-3000, but I morphed them back to work on the MPC-60.
Right.
And that was one thing that I sold for a while.
Yeah.
But I think what you're alluding to is the first major product of Roger Linn Design was the Adrenaline guitar pedal.
Yeah. So we've moved into the 2000s and you've started the new company. And now I've been in front of the Adrenaline when it first landed in the country, and I'm looking at it from a keyboard player's perspective. I'm going, what is this thing exactly? And it took me a little bit to get my head around it. But once I got my head around it, I'm going, wow, this is really, really cool. So can you you want to give us an overview of what the Adrenaline is? And this is a product that you collaborated with Dave Smith on.
Well, Dave helped me with some of the code at one point, because I was rushing towards a production deadline, and I was bothered by fixing all my mistakes as a businessman.
Right.
Didn't have enough time to finish the code. So he, for a couple of months, he wrote finished some of the code that needed to be written.
Right.
But it wasn't a collaboration like, for example, we did on the Tempest.
Right.
But here's a brief description of what Adrenaline was. And it was... When I used to work with modular synthesizers, particularly the EMU modular, which is one of the things that I convinced Leon to buy in the early days.
Awesome.
I convinced him to buy a $20,000 EMU modular synthesizer system. But it had a analog sequencer that would step through analog values, and then it had filters and all these sorts of things. And what I used to do with it, and Leon enjoyed this too, is we'd run things through it, like guitar or piano or even percussion instruments. And you'd have, for example, a sequence that was synced to your music you're recording, and it would step through a series of specific resonant filter tones.
Yep.
And there were some very interesting things you could do with that, but it took a big modular synthesizer to do it. Well, I thought, why not put some of these things into a simple guitar pedal that would be easy enough for a guitar player just to select from some presets. So, for example, it was used by the guitar player John Mayer on a song he had called "Bigger Than My Body."
Yep.
And with this, it was interesting. It took in the adrenaline pedal, it had a flanger. And a flanger is just a resonant audio delay with a very short audio delay, and therefore the period that creates the pitch is just the feedback of those delayed notes. And so the sequencer that was built into the adrenaline would allow the flanger frequency to step through specific notes. So he would just play a certain guitar part, and it would be filtered through the sequence that would resonate and go. That was just a preset on the adrenaline that I had made,
Right.
and he liked it. So it was inspirational. It was sort of thing you could play into it, and it would create all kinds of interesting things that would perhaps stimulate a song, and do other beat synced effects as well. It had a drum beat in it too, a simple drum machine, and so you play the drum beat, and it was one of the things that Mayer did too. But it was examples are a sequence of these resonant filter tones or resonant flanger tones, or beat synced tremolo that was synced to the beat synced flanging that every 8 bars would go exactly to the top of the range, then come down 4 bars and go back up 8 bars later, or other things like that. And the other thing it had was it had amp models in it too, guitar amp models. So it did a lot of different things. Ultimately, it was a little bit confusing for guitar players who really, they sort of their brains max out on 3 or 4 knobs.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people were confused by how to use it. But a lot of other people who weren't guitar players actually found it very interesting because it was very usable.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is it was $400, and $400 to a guitar player is like what you pay for a house. It's not. They want a pedal to be around $99, or at least they did at the time in the early 2000s. So it was a big purchase decision for them. But I did sell over 12,000 of them, so that's not bad for a pedal.
Yeah.
Before I had Adrenaline 1, I had Adrenaline 2, better, more features. Adrenaline 3, better, more features, different color.
Yep.
And then finally, I retired the product 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
2023.
Right. Okay. So that was a pretty good run. That's 22 odd years. Yeah, that was a great run. And right in the middle of that, there was an M Audio black box. What was that exactly?
Well, I've known Tim Ryan for a long time, who's the founder of M Audio.
Yeah,
and still do. He's a very nice guy. Anyway, so we were talking, and he said, "How would you like to make some stuff with our company?" I said, "Well, sure." He said, "Why don't we take the Adrenaline 2 and maybe make a simplified feature-limited version of it and combine it with an audio interface."
Right.
And that's what Black Box was.
Yeah, I completely missed that one in the mix until I did my research. I went, I somehow missed that one in 2005 by the look of it. So there you go. So let's have a quick chat about the Tempest analog drum machine that you did with Dave, because that was a bit of a monster.
Yeah, it was a very good product. I was proud of that one. This one was, Dave and I were talking. We had thought about collaborations in the past because I've known Dave for many years. He was a good friend. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I'll say this too, before I describe the Tempest, is that Dave was quite the athlete. He actually did the Hawaii Ironman triathlon back when he was a younger man. Right. And he just loved these extreme sports. And he would try to get me on these things. and I'm not. I'm really kind of more of a nerd. And so, for example, he got me, together we climbed Mount Whitney, which is in the Sierras in California. And I named the trip Iron Man and the Nerd. Right. Because we climbed up, first of all, to about 10,000 feet. The peak is at 14,000, and you get altitude sickness.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
So at 10,000 feet, we're in the base camp, and we'd set up a tent, and the idea was to sleep there, and then in the morning, climb up to the peak and then go back down all the way. So anyway, I was kind of worried about this altitude sickness. And so Dave and I are in the tent, and he's falling asleep, and I'm reading the book, and it says, if you have the following symptoms, get down the mountain fast. Right. Nausea, sinus problems, shortness of breath is like that. And so it was kind of like the scene in the movie Airplane where the guy eat the fish dinner and he's about to get sick, and the doctor describes the symptoms, and all of a sudden he starts having all the symptoms.
Having them, yeah.
So it was probably psychosomatic. Anyway, I said to Dave, I think I've got altitude sickness. He said, shut up and go to sleep.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Dave and I were friends, and we would talk occasionally about making products. And so we thought, why don't we make an analog drum machine? Dave is Mr. Analog, I'm Mr. Drum Machine, right? And so we did so. And I first started out making a lot of 3D renderings and control layouts. And we finally decided on a certain control design and product size and all that. He wanted to make it fairly small size. And so that was part of the constraint. But he let me go free with the user interface on it. And so it ended up being a very good machine, and it had Dave's analog voices, which he had over a number of years perfected. Really, he has an extraordinary analog voice. It's snappy. It has a very sharp attack if you want it, or softer attack. But really, it has a very, very good sound, and a lot of people really like that voice. So the Tempest had so many great features, and so when it was first released, there's 16 pads in it, drum pads, touch-sensitive pads, and each one plays a certain sound, or you can have it play one of the 16 sequences that are in memory. And I made up the first preset batch of sequences, and so the first one, the first beat was a 4-bar phrase right from, and it also had my early drum sounds in it. So one of the first sequences was the 4-bar phrase looped from "Don't You Want Me" by Human League.
Oh, yes,
which
of course.
Was the first top 10 hit for the LM1.
Yes.
And plus it had Dave synth sounds in it. So you just press the button and go, dan, 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 dan. And people would play that, and they were happy, It was and I did also the same thing, a 4-bar loop or maybe 8-bar loop from a Prince song and from some other things. So it gave a little bit of nostalgia, but it also allowed people to do the music of the modern era at the time. And a lot of people did use that for making music.
Yeah. So the drum machine was 100% analog. I mean, the sound source was 100% analog, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
There was nothing digital in the signal path. In fact, I wanted to put delay in it so you could have sort of all the syncopated dotted eighth delays and stuff.
Yeah.
But we had no digital processing in it. So I actually used had in the software, it would play delayed notes just by creating new voices.
Right.
And so you'd get delay, and it had controls there for delay time, but everything was actually generated.
Oh. Wow. Awesome. And now we get to your latest instrument, the LinnStrument.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you give us a nice overview on that one, Roger?
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
And by the way, my name fits into product names wonderfully.
Yeah.
Yes.
The LinnDrum,
Yeah.
the LinnStrument,
Yeah.
the Adrenaline.
Yeah.
Much better than my name, which is just Brown at the end, and that's just not good for product names.
No.
I know it wouldn't work.
Not for electrical products, Pete.
No.
But anyway, it's funny because when I made the Adrenaline, it's actually a modulation processor, and I was thinking about calling it Maudlin.
Nice. Right, okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Still fits in.
Yeah. Anyway, so the LinnStrument, that's what I'm making now. What LinnStrument is a instrument that brings the touch expression of acoustic instruments, like vibrato on a violin, or bending strings on a guitar, or the breath control and embouchure of a wind instrument. It brings these to the performance of electronic sound. And I noticed one thing that was happening was that all synthesis was being performed on on-off switches, like a MIDI keyboard. In other words, you press the sound to turn it on, although if you press it harder, it's louder. If you press it softer, it's quieter. And same thing with drum machines. You have these touch-sensitive pads, and they're not really used for pressure because they're used for percussive sounds. They're used for velocity. So you strike the sound, you turn it on, and you lift your finger off, or even don't lift your finger off, and it turns off. And so I noticed there was a result happening. There were no more instrumental solos in pop songs, in electronically generated music. And, when I grew up, I was a guitar player, and there was always a guitar solo, or in country, there was a fiddle solo or a pedal steel solo, or instrumental musicians were very noted for being part of the band. And those had virtually disappeared in electronically generated music, and that was most of music, increasingly as time moved forward. And I thought, that's kind of a loss. And I thought, why is that? Well, I think one of the reasons is that people were performing music with on-off switches. So what was synthesis really used for is background parts, sequences, drum beats, bass parts played on a Minimoog or a simple keyboard or something like that. And so I thought, well, why don't I do something that allows you to capture more of your touch expression? And so LinnStrument captures 3 dimensions in addition to velocity and release velocity. When you press one of its pads, which are like smaller versions of drum pads, it captures your velocity, your pressure of your playing, plus your left-right movement, which is usually used for vibrato or pitch slides, and forward-backward movement, which changes the timbre, almost like an example would be a violinist who plays sometimes at the bridge with his bow, or sometimes at the neck for a fuller tone, and uses that to add interest to the musical expression. And this is something that I didn't do first. The godfather of expressive instruments is Lippold Hawken, who makes an instrument called the continuum, which he did in 1999, and he actually published an academic paper on it in 1986. So he was way ahead of everyone. He's got the continuum. I can see that Pete has the continuum mini. Marvelous instrument.
There you go.
Anyway, so I'm doing something like the continuum, except instead of having all the notes in one long row, all the pitches in one long row equally spaced, I have 8 different smaller rows. And that allows you to, like a stringed instrument, traverse rows. And so the LinnStrument, if you look at it, it looks like a big grid controller where all the pads in the grid have lights. But all those pads are sensitive to 3 dimensions plus release velocity and velocity. And the way the pitches are laid out is each of the rows is like a string on a stringed instrument, where each consecutive pad, as you go from left to right, is 1 semitone higher. And each of the rows has that same thing, and you can control the tuning of each of the rows, the offset in pitch between the rows. So you can tune it like a cello or violin. You can tune it like guitar. These 8 rows, by default, are tuned in musical force with their 5 semitones. And I've sold over 5,000 of these so far. And it's so funny because it's largely bubbling under. A lot of people don't even know what it is. But for the people that really appreciate it, they've already purchased it.
Yeah.
And I call instrument players LinnStrumentalists.
LinnStrumentalists.
Nice.
There you go.
Nice.
Now, and again, this is from a perspective of a keyboard player. I remember I was looking at it, I'm going, how are those notes laid out? And so, and yes, you've explained it, that it's very much, it'd be very familiar for anyone that has played a string instrument, that those note layouts would make sense. Where for me, being a keyboard player, probably the Rolly would probably make a little bit more, that would have been easier for me to actually adapt, Yeah,
and there's another one. Expressive E has a wonderful instrument called the Osmos, which is more, it's easier for keyboard players. But I'm going to tell you, even though you play keyboard, I forgive you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. That's a very good point. And the Rolly is an excellent instrument, too. I know Roland Lamb and have it for a while, and he's a very creative guy, very charismatic guy. And I know the guys at Osmos, too. People who are into these weird instruments, we all know each other. We're all good friends. But I think when I first made LinnStrument, I thought, well, this would be great for keyboard players too, because they could still play the keyboard, then put the LinnStrument behind it and use that for soloing parts for the expression. But keyboard players, they haven't embraced it as much as people who have just thought about instruments and thought about what an instrument can be in the 21st century. So it ends up being, as opposed to something that you'd use in addition to the instrument you play, people tend to value it more as a new instrument, which I guess makes sense.
Yep.
And so they'll play two-headed parts, chords and melody parts and such, and then overdub separately if they want to for that. But it is it's a new instrument, and it's kind of funny when you think about it. Take your piano keyboard. Now, it's interesting to me. It's fascinating, I would say, that people are carrying these things around to gigs or to friends' houses and such, these electronic keyboards. And the only reason that those keys are in the positions, the locations they are, is that a few centuries ago, it was the only way to play it because you had to have a string behind each key.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that's, the thing is, it's not a bad instrument. It ends up being a very good interface because it's easy if you only want to play the scale notes. You just don't hit those pesky black keys in the back, and you can play, in the 7 musical modes. It works out very, very nicely. And with the advent of electronic keyboards, you can change a transpose knob, and you never have to leave those white keys. So it makes it very good.
Yeah, yeah.
But even blues can take some occasional accidental. So you need those sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually didn't realize that each of the rows on that you could change the offset and the tuning and stuff on that. There's a lot more to this than I realized.
And by the way, in LinnStrument, all the pads are lit. And so in 2 colors, and you can change which scales are lit. But normally, all the C major scales notes are lit, and the accidentals are not lit. And the root note of the scale, the C, is lit in blue, and the other ones are lit in green. Somebody once asked me, why did you choose green and blue and green? And I said, what was the line from the James Taylor song? I said, deep greens and blues are the colors I choose. But actually, they're RGB LEDs. You can set them in any color. But the point is that just like a piano, if you don't want to hit those pesky sharps and flats, you just only hit the pads with the lights on.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There you go.
So, even Vin, you could do it as a keyboard player. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe Vin, you could do it as a keyboard player.
Thanks, mate.
You have to be a good keyboard player, Vin.
Mate, I'm so far out of practice with my just traditional keyboard playing. I mean, introducing me to a kind of a whole new way of thinking.
I'm having fun with you. But,
no.
If you're a keyboard player, it makes more sense to get a Rolly or an Osmos, depending on what features you want.
Yeah.
The closer you get to the true keyboard player's interface, the less expression you get.
Yeah, no, of course.
For example, in the Osmos, it's a very good keyboard for keyboard players, but your only expression really is pressure and wiggling your finger a little bit for a small vibrato.
Yeah.
What I like about this is it encourages you. So keyboard's my thing as well, but this encourages you to look at it fresh, I think is probably the best way to say it. It is learning a different instrument at that point.
Yeah.
And like good things are going to come of that.
Yes.
Except for in Vin's case, like where really bad things might come from that.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
Well, I can forgive you both for your sins.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It's like, Pete, it'll be like, both of us attempting to play a theremin proficiently.
Oh yeah, there's no way in hell. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
It's one of the worst human interfaces in history.
Yeah. And but seeing the people that have actually, some of the players that have mastered it, Roger, is just absolutely astonishing for me. Some of those.
But they're gluttons for punishment.
Yeah.
But it is. Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. But it's almost impossible to play in tune. And the people that do it, I really respect them for what they do.
Yeah.
One of the ideas of LinnStrument is because our modern technological era allows the separation of the human interface from the sound generation. You are no longer crippled by the user interfaces of acoustic instruments. For example, violin. It's a wonderful instrument when it's in the hand of a skilled player, but you have to stick the thing between your chin and your neck. And then the sound dies away so quickly that you have to take this bow, which is made out of horse's hair, and scrape the strings the whole time.
Yeah, of course.
If I went into a music store and said, I've got this great instrument, would you like to buy it? And they'd say, you're crazy. No one would take this. And so one of the goals in LinnStrument is to make it easy to play. And so the pads on LinnStrument are the exact same and spacing of average human fingers. So the user interface is designed for the human itself. himself or herself. And, so if you want to, you just press that pad, it plays the note, and it has pitch quantization if you turn it on. And basically, it's kind of like it has frets before you play, and once you play it, it turns the frets off. So then you can wiggle your finger and slide to other pitches around.
That's smart. Yep.
Yeah.
So you can do a perfect theremin on it, and you can do it in a few minutes instead of suffering for years trying to learn to play that.
Trying to play theremin, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Now, let's move to a piece of some technology that is actually integral with the LinnStrument, and that's MPE. Now,
yes.
You had, some consider you the father or the godfather of MIDI Polyphonic Expression. Can you just give us some overview on your work with MPE?
Well, MPE, I've said earlier that the LinnStrument sends 3 different continuous signals: pressure, left, right, the x-axis, and forward, backward, the y-axis. So X, Y, and Z. The trouble with MIDI is that if you can't send all that stuff if you want to do it polyphonically over a single MIDI channel. LinnStrument, it allows independent 3-dimensional continuous control of those 3 dimensions for all notes of a chord, all notes you're playing simultaneous. But in MIDI, over a single MIDI channel, the pitch bend message, which is used for pitch control, applies to all notes all the time.
Yeah.
And the same thing with all the channel, control change messages.
Yeah, aftertouch as well, With aftertouch, you can get some polyphonic aftertouch expression, but I can understand exactly where you're coming from, because, if we're doing a pitch bend or modulation.
Pressure.
Yeah.
In 1984, when the MIDI 1.0 spec was released, they had polyphonic pressure. This is largely from Yamaha because they already had polyphonic pressure keyboards. Yep. And in sequential wanted to do it as well. So that made sense. But that's the only dimension that's polyphonic.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, the original writers of the MIDI spec included a way to do polyphonic 3-dimensional expression. They didn't know it at the time, but they did. And that's to send every touch over a separate MIDI channel, rotating through the 16 channels.
Right.
So it worked just fine. And by the way, in LinnStrument over a MIDI channel, you can do full expression for solo parts. It's just if you want to have polyphonic expression, then you can't do it over a single MIDI channel.
Right.
But in the original MIDI 1984 spec had something called MIDI Mode 4, where it allowed you to send a note over each MIDI channel. And this was important at the time because if you wanted to make a guitar MIDI controller, you wanted to have independent bends for each string.
Of course.
So it worked with MIDI 1.0. Anyway, so fast forward to the future. I've got my LinnStrument. Roland Lamb has his Rolly keyboard, and the Apple and Moog and a few other companies. We were all just talking about it. And we said, this is great. We'll just use MIDI Mode 4. And Roland Lamb, he thought it would be good to have an official MIDI mode that is released by the official MIDI Association. And I said, that's fine. And Roland thought it was important. So they added a few things to it, but the basis is the same thing as old 1984 MIDI 1.0. It's just sending each touch over a separate MIDI channel.
Mm.
And by the way, Apple, in their Logic and Mainstage programs, already had implemented this, and they called it MIDI mono mode. And it's basically using this mono mode, which was the MIDI Mode 4 of the original MIDI spec. And what they did is they used one channel, either 1 or 16, for messages that are common to all notes you're playing, like overall volume, program change, sustain pedal. And then the remaining 15 channels were used for the notes you're actually playing. So I suggested to everybody who was putting this up, let's just use what Apple's already doing in Logic and Mainstage. And that's ultimately what we did. There were a few things added to it, but it's just 1984 MIDI and with one common channel. That's a long explanation to a short question.
Yeah. Well, and of course that's now rolled into MIDI 2, where this is Pete's wheelhouse there, Pete. So can you give us some overview of MPE in MIDI 2?
Well, MIDI 2 is a very elegant rethinking of what MIDI should be. The original MIDI spec had very low bandwidth limitation. And so they had to squeeze a lot of stuff in there into each of those messages. And that's why velocity only has 127 levels. Same with all the control change messages. And pitch bend is 14-bit, so that has high resolution. But it's better if you can have a high resolution floating point number. And the writers of the MIDI 2 spec were very smart in creating something that didn't have those limitations. Because these days you can go over USB and the bandwidth problems are gone. And there's a bunch of other stuff too for communication between controller and synthesizer. It's very well thought out, and I really commend the writers of the MIDI 2 spec for that. The problem, unfortunately, in the marketplace is nobody has a good enough reason to do it. And the other thing is that a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, it took me 30 years to wrap my head around MIDI 1 and now you're changing it. So the problem is people aren't embracing it. They don't have a reason to it. For example, there's no reason like you can't do MPE unless you get MIDI 2, because you can do MPE with 1984 MIDI 1. And so people aren't really using it yet. And I think what will happen is maybe, a big company like a Roland or a Yamaha or another big company, they'll make a keyboard and a synthesizer that everybody embraces maybe. And people will say, I love the fact that on my MIDI controller keyboard, I can turn these controls and I can see that it says filter frequency, and the filter frequency of the remote synthesizer changes. And all I have to do is connect the two of them, and I can see on my screen exactly what my knob is controlling. And that's, I think, a big advantage of MIDI 2.0. Yeah. But unfortunately for most people, they're saying it already seems to be fine. And so it's kind of a hard sell for most people. And we'll see what happens. I think it's slowly being adopted, but the vast majority of people aren't doing it. One of the problems, too, is there's so many different plugins, and many of them are just written by one or two guys at night after they leave work from their day gig. And they're thinking, oh, God, I don't want to write MIDI 2. Enough people are complaining about how I wrote MIDI 1. So it's a slow thing, but it's a very elegant and well-designed solution.
Yep. So, Pete?
Yeah, so there are a couple things that'll help there. So one, I know part of it is we haven't released Microsoft's implementation of MIDI 2 yet. That's this October when that goes into the box on Windows. And then the other thing is Juice, which is what I'd say the majority or a very large number of the plugins is written in, just released a preview of MIDI 2.0 support internally. So between those two things, I think we're going to see quite a bit more uptake.
Yeah.
That's right, because so many plugins are run using the Juice platform, using the Juice platform. And so that'll make it easier for people to implement MIDI 2.0 in plugins. However, the plugin has to be plugged into the DAW, so the DAW's got to pass it through correctly too.
Yep, and Cubase has supported it because they support it for Mac OS, and they have some prototypes on Windows and other stuff. So yeah, it'll take some time, but I think we're starting to see an inflection point on that.
That's great, yeah.
And the other thing is MPE doesn't go away. So you can run MPE over all the same stuff here. It'll still work the way it did before. You can run it over MIDI 1 or MIDI 2. It's just now there's another option that if people want to do it a different way, then there's another way to do it. And then all the other high resolution stuff that goes with it.
Yeah. It's but I think they had to the writers of MIDI 2, they had to just break from MIDI 1. It would have been too difficult to make an expansion of MIDI 1. And so I think they did it the right way. I think they thought through it correctly and they did it the right way.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So just real quickly, have you got any thoughts on the current landscape of music technology, Roger?
Well, yeah, I was always a musician first, and technologist second. And as a musician, one of the things that always frustrated me by buying gear when I was a young man was I'd buy a product and the marketing information would say easy to use. And I would get a musical idea. So I go into my music room and thinking, oh, this is great. I'll use this new product to record a song. 3 hours later, I'm sitting on the floor with manuals on the floor and trying to read the thing. And so what I've tried to do, and often not successfully, is to make products for, God forbid, musicians to use. And so when they go into their music room and they have a musical idea, they can immediately start making music. And that was one of the things I did in the original MPC 60. I tried to make it simple. I used musical terms, not engineering terms. And I put a help button in there. So if you didn't understand something, you press help and it would say this button or this element on the screen, this is what it does. Well, that's one of the things that Akai took off very quickly after we parted ways.
Great.
Yeah.
Of course, and who needs the help button, right?
Yep, of course.
But I really, what I'm leading to here is that I think things are too complex. And we have this current crop of musicians that are, I think, more what I would call sound enthusiasts.
Right.
And I noticed this something like 10 years ago when I was showing my LinnStrument at trade shows, doing my dog and pony show, is I'd have it playing a sound like a guitar sound or a violin sound or something like that. Anyway, so someone comes up and says, I've heard about this thing. And they'd start immediately rapid fire peppering me with technical questions. How many bits is this? What's the sampling rate? What's the sampling rate of the interface? How many controls on it? And what about how do you control filter frequency and resonance and all this sort of stuff? And I would answer all the questions dutifully, and then I'd say, would you like to play it? And then their face would turn white as a ghost. and so I said, yeah, here's a sound. What do you think? This is a 3-dimensional sound. What do you think? And the person would just drag his finger like he's a child finger painting over the surface. And I realized that there are a lot of people today that don't really know anything about music or scales or notes, but they're fascinated by the sound technology, or that's at least as big a part as the musical part, the musical content. And so, but so much of the music that they create today, if you look on YouTube videos, for example, is twisting filter knobs and sound and using things to modify the waveform, for example. And my particular focus is to throw all that away and give musicians something that allows them to create an imagined sound. Because sound creation is a part of composition these days. But the idea is to make something that is more for musicians. And I notice a lot of plugins these days for synthesis seem to be more better plugins, more oscillators, more envelopes, more LFOs, more effects, more filters. And to me, that isn't designing. To me, that's just engineering. But to me, very few people are asking the question, what does the musician want to do? And I think the musician wants to be able to create a sound using musical controls, musical terms, and finding a way to do that in the least amount of time, and then setting those sounds aside and say, I'll use these ones. I have an essay on my website about the idea of using an AI system for creating sounds. And the idea being you would describe the sound, you would play the sound to the AI and say, give me this sound, or give me something that's a morph between this sound and a trumpet or a violin or something like that, traditional sound, or this synthesizer sound from Keith Emerson or whoever, right? Mm-hmm. And then have it this knob, do this knob, and the AI creates it, maybe is a browser resident MIDI synthesizer, and says, what do you think? And I say, well, that's okay, but I asked you to make a brightness control, and it sounds like filter frequency. Make it more like the natural harmonic expansion of an acoustic instrument. And it says, okay, I'll do this. And it says, what do you think? It says, that's closer. Now, for the sound generation, give me a little space where I can morph between 4 different sounds that I describe, and not just by blending them in volume, but actually changing the fundamental sound generation. So, for example, if you'd made something between a violin and a trumpet, you'd end up with something that doesn't just blend those 2 sounds, but a new instrument between them that says, okay, I'll do this. What do you think? Okay, that's it. Let me save it as a preset. And I think that would make the most sense, and get rid of all those terms like resonance or pulse width or sawtooth and all that stuff, and just make them musical terms. So the musician, it's so interesting. Our industry, electronic music instruments, is almost entirely men. There's no women. The women are too smart. They play their acoustic instruments. They forget about that nonsense. But there's a whole bag of people who don't give a hoot about engineering, and they just want to play music.
Right.
Yeah.
But yet, it's amazing the mindset of the design engineers within these companies, because most of them make this primary mistake, this fundamental mistake of assuming that the person who's going to use their product is just like them and use this product 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, thinking about it. They don't. They come home from work. They don't even want to see a computer. but much less have something with all kinds of engineering knobs on it. They just want to make music, and they don't want to have to relearn it every time they come. Maybe they use the music room once a week, once a month, who knows? But those are people who would buy things if they were actually usable by musicians without having to study a manual. That's my. I'll get off my podium right now.
No, and look, that's very well explained, Roger. And look, I understand completely. There are some instruments, we'll say synthesizer instruments that I've come across that the actual engineering and the sound design aspect of it is absolutely amazing. But you know what? I can't use any of the sounds in any of my songs. So I'm like going, okay, well, that's great for sound design and amazing type of, you get some amazing textures, but where the fuck am I going to use it? Sorry. But I mean,
it's funny you say that, because I started to notice this other trend about 10 or more years ago. I'd see one of these new plugins, synth plugins, and I'd go through the presets. And you know what I was looking for was something I'd play a melody on. But instead, you press a button on your controller, LinnStrument in my case, and it would sound something like this. And I had actually had an employee once, and he said he was a musician. I said, well, play me some of your things. And he said, here's a film soundtrack I'm working on. And he pressed one button on the instrument, and it made the sound just like that. Then for 3 minutes later, he pressed another button, and it goes, and he said, what do you think? I said, oh, that would be a beautiful soundtrack.
Yeah, fantastic soundtrack. That, what you were just imitating there, it sounds very much like the trailer music stuff, with all of the rises and all you needed was some huge percussive stuff in the background, and there you go. You would have just written some trailer music there, Roger. That was awesome.
And I'm not belittling people who enjoy exploring sound. I've done that myself. I just loved with the old EMU modular synthesizer, playing with the oscillator knobs and learning about it. It was just marvelous.
Yeah.
My old Juno back in the day, I think, had a helicopter sound on it, so roughly about the same usage.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, look, probably my favorite. Look, I've got there's quite a few virtual instruments that I really like, but one of my favorite that I've kind of stumbled on recently is, believe it or not, the Surge XT, which is open source freeware synthesizer that I've since discovered, and I was staring at me this whole time, that it was actually created by Klaus from
Johansson.
Yeah, from
the founder of Bitwig.
From Bitwig, and we've had him on the show. And I can't remember, Pete, did we actually talk about Surge XT when we had him on? I don't think we did.
Not with him, I don't think.
So, I stumbled on that one and just went, oh, hang on. It's got everything. It's got FM. It's got, and analog subtractive and
it has everything.
It's got everything in it, and it's free.
And by the way, that's the official synthesizer of LinnStrument.
Ah, there you go.
Oh, is it really?
I made a library of MPE sounds for it, and they're in the general release. But it's marvelous for LinnStrument because it has so much control. And Klaus is so wonderful. He did something that few people do. When he became too busy with Bitwig, or perhaps other projects at the time, I'm not sure, to continue with Surge, he gave it away open source.
Yeah.
And the community has come together, a collection of engineers and other people, to support it and to generally keep the product alive. And they've added some wonderful features.
Yeah.
And there are some of those folks are on our MIDI Discord because they've been quick to adopt new things and try out new stuff. It's a great group of people.
Yeah. So it is an amazing instrument. It actually blew me away when I sat down, and because, look, I probably would have stumbled on it maybe 10 years ago or something. I went, yeah. But we did a show recently with the guys from Cherry Audio who were very passionate about doing physical models of classic instruments. They've also got some kind of blended stuff that they've done, hybrid blended stuff that they've done. But chatting to them and playing some of their modeled instruments, at the same time, I was just fumbling around going, okay, what is available freeware? Because I've got this DAWbench project thing where I always have a tendency to look for reliable and stable and good quality freeware plugins for the project.
Yeah.
And I went in with no expectation whatsoever with Surge XT, and I've spent days in it, Roger, days in it. I've gone, what the heck can this be free? And it is an amazing instrument. And well, there you go. And it's the official instrument of the LinnStrument.
What I love about it is the very, very wide variety of sound generation.
Yes.
And one thing on the LinnStrument is because you can tilt your finger forward and backward in the default assignment to timbral change, there are so many ways to alter the fundamental structure of the waveform, not just filtering, but actually alter the waveform.
Yep.
And very creative ways, and you can do so much with that stuff.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Amazing stuff. Amazing. Yeah, so hang on. I'm looking at my my run sheet here. Here we go. 2011, awarded a Grammy Award for Lifetime Technical Achievement, Roger. That would have been an amazing experience. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see it. It's on my mantle of the fireplace.
Well, there you go. And just
nice.
And I do have to say that for the people listening in, yes, I've got visual of Pete and Roger today. I'm basically just a black box with an animation because I don't have a camera, but I can actually see the guys today, which is a first for me. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the podcast is going to video, but who knows. So what the Technical Achievement Award, Roger, can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Oh, it's just a wonderful acknowledgement. Sometime in 2010, I was given the award in 2011.
Yep.
And the president of the Grammy organization called me up and said, I'd like to talk to you, and then I've asked something to tell you about. And what do you think it might be? And I said, well, you probably want me to buy a table at some sort of a Grammy fundraiser or something like that. And he said, no. And he explained the technical Grammy, and he said, we'd like to give it to you this year. And all of a sudden, I just shouted out, yes!
Yeah.
I think he pulled the phone away from his ear. But it was a wonderful acknowledgement. And it's really interesting. They give out a lot of Grammys every year. The TV show is only for maybe 15 prepubescent cute people that have hit songs. But they give out about 110 Grammys every year.
Right.
And they have this one special event they call the Special Grammy Merit Award. Yeah, Merit Awards. And, it's mostly for music-related stuff. One of them is the technical Grammy, and they give it to a person. And in 2011, they gave it to me, and they gave another one to a company. So anyway, when I got the award, I knew I would be able to give a short speech at this event, and so I know a lot of people in the industry, and I thought, I wonder, maybe I'll ask who got it last year and ask them what it's about. Well, it was Thomas Edison.
Right.
They gave it to him posthumously.
Wow.
And I realized this is the award they give to people they think are about to die.
Oh no.
So I'm 69, but it's special. It's for a lifetime of achievement,
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot about it. And they gave me me and my wife a ticket and then for 2 other people to attend the Grammy TV show. And that's great. They'll probably set me down in a special area. I was up on the second tier over on the right side.
Yeah.
They were more important people than me, apparently, for those hot seats. And it was, it's so funny because it was held in this stadium, basically a sports stadium. And I asked them because it said the invitation said it's a black tie event. I said, I don't have a tux. So I could just wear a nice suit and I'm sure I'd be fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my wife and I get there, and my wife is all dressed up. I'm dressed up, and this is a sports stadium. And we enter in, and there's this line of people, women in evening gowns, guys in Texas, standing on the concrete floor in front of the hot dog stand.
Yeah.
And for the people that went up to the third tier, we're at the back, they're climbing up these concrete steps in high heels and such. it's a Grammy's organization. It's not a nonprofit. It's a private company, and they really do very, very well. And I found there were a few things that were interesting because it was a live TV show they were filming, and what they would do is whenever they would cut to a commercial, they'd bring in the seat fillers, which are teenagers that had won a lottery to be able to attend. They say seat fillers, and these guys start rushing in from the back door and fill up all the empty seats. So when they cut back from commercial and they pan across the audience, it's a full house.
Right. But wait, why don't they just leave them sitting in the seats, Roger?
No. Apparently the idea is that people, I guess the idea is that people, if there's a seat there, they don't want to have somebody who got it for free. I don't know. Maybe they stayed in there. I'm not sure. But anyway, they wanted to make sure that all the seats were filled.
Right.
And then they gave me tickets to the after party. I thought, oh, that's great. It's a very special after party.
Yep.
Well, there must have been 3,000 people at the after party. There was about a half an hour line to get into the after party entrance. And I think we had to pay. Oh, and they gave me the option. This is what it was. The tickets were free for my wife and I, and they gave me the kind opportunity to let 2 other friends buy tickets for $200 a piece.
Buy the
at
tickets.
Least.
Yes.
And then $200 more for the after party. So we had some friends come, and it was pretty funny. But they make a bundle off this thing, and but it was a great honor. But it was also eye-opening.
You've just exploded the whole image,
and it was well deserved. And congratulations!
Yes,
but
of course,
it's kind of fun to get the behind-the-scenes dirt on what's actually happening there.
That's almost the story. The saying is never meet your heroes. That one is like, man, I don't. Do we really wanted to know what was going on? Now I'm going to be watching the Grammys going,
where are all the teenagers?
Where are all the seat fillers?
Yes.
I wonder what the hot dogs are like.
Yeah. Check for somebody with mustard on their tux, I think.
Oh, that's great, Roger. That's great. Now, I've got one other thing that if you feel like sharing, you had a weekly gathering. I'm not even sure whether you're still doing this or not, whether you're doing it virtually or not, but you called it the Member of Dead Presidents Society. And I'm thinking, what?
Yes. This is when I lived in Berkeley. I now am in Los Altos in Silicon Valley. But when we lived in Berkeley, my wife and I, in Berkeley, wonderful place to live, by the way. It's a great historical place with the Berkeley University there and so many things that came out of Berkeley.
Yep.
Anyway, I work at home, and it can be boring sometimes, and it's nice to get together with friends. So Tom Overheim also lives in the area, and he was doing some work at the university, doing some creation of prototypes for them for a while.
Right.
And so he would come over the hill, and I said, why don't we meet once a week down at this coffee house that's right near the north entrance to the university? He said, sure, that's great. And so then a few other people joined too, and Dave Smith would come sometimes, and we noticed that all 3 of us, Tom, Dave, and I, were all former presidents of companies that had died. And so there had been a movie at the time called the Dead Poets Society.
That's
with Robin
right.
Williams.
Yeah.
And so we called our little breakfast club the Dead Presidents Society for that very reason.
Yeah.
And but then again, we started to have some academics in there. We had Max Matthews. We had Keith. Keith McMillan. He's a product designer as well. But we had David Wessel, who was head of CINMAT, the Berkeley University Computer Music School. And so Keith decided that maybe we should just keep the acronym DPS and change it to, because of all the academics, the Declined Papers Society.
Right.
But anyway, it was a very nice group of people, and there's a wonderful picture I have that's Dave, me, Tom, David Wessel, John Chowning, Max Matthews, and even Jaron Lanier came down because he lives in Berkeley too, to join us for the photo anyway. But the core group was Max and me and then Tom and Don Buchla.
I was about to say Don Buchla. Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah. Don's, because he was just up the hill also in Berkeley.
Yeah.
But then again, when we moved down here it eventually actually faded away. And one thing that was a little bit embarrassing is a few of the members were dying. David Wessel died, Max Matthews died, and so the name Dead Presidents Society was a little bit not the best name at that.
No, of course.
So anyway, that group kind of eventually faded away just because some people were dying, and then some people either moved away or they were busy at the time. But when I came down here to Los Altos, I created a new meeting, a lunch group, and it's a few people. It's Evan Brooks, who's the co-founder of Digital Design.
Oh yeah, he's been on the show. Evan's been on. So you see Evan regularly, do you?
Well, he doesn't come to all of them. He tends to. Morning for him starts at around noon.
Yeah.
He sleeps pretty late.
Right.
But other people are in the group. Let's see. We've got. Sometimes we've got Dave Oppenheim. He was the founder of Opcode.
Yes.
And he writes a lot of the code at Digital Design.
Yes.
Marcus Ryle, founder of Line 6. And of Fast Forward Designs. Let's see. Julius Smith, the professor at CCRMA, the Computer Music School at Stanford, and a brilliant mathematician and a good musician too.
Yep.
Guy Matthews, Max Matthews' son, and Guy is a very interesting person. He has a piano that has a whole tone keyboard. In other words, the keys are white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, all up the entire keyboard. So you only have to learn to play in two fingerings,
right?
Either the even or the odd fingerings. And James McCartney, the writer of Super Collider language.
Yes.
Very good music and audio language. And James McCartney has a Janko piano, or Yanko, which is a form of piano where it has the keys are in layers ascending, and the front row is all whole tones, and then the next row after that are the in-between notes. After that those two rows are doubled and then doubled again. And so he has an actual acoustic piano that has the Yanko format. But it's all weird people like that. So, let's see who we got. Pascal Joquet, the creator of the Jouet keyboard of the Jazz Mutant Lemur. He calls in from France.
The Jazz Mutant. Yeah, I remember that.
And a bunch of other people. But so since everybody's fairly technical, I call this group Nerds of a Feather.
All right. Well, look, we've had Evan and Marcus both on the show, both fantastic guests, and I'm still in contact with Evan and Marcus. I send them a couple of emails, during the year just to check in on how the guys are going, and fantastic. I mean, what a group, Roger. So that, and again, Pete will hear me. Has heard me say this multiple times. I mean, the whole 6 degree of separation thing within our industry. I mean, it's not even 6 degrees. You're at about a half a degree with separation with some of these people there. So, yeah, amazing, absolutely amazing. All right. Well, is there anything else you want to chat about, Roger?
My website is rogerlinndesign.com, ROGERLINNDESIGN.com. And there's a bunch of stuff on there. One thing I can talk about is that about a year and a half ago, the current Akai Corporation, sent me one of their, MPC Live products, the latest, iteration of the MPC.
Right.
And, so I tried it out, and I was actually very surprised how good it was. It's interesting because they tried to respect the original design, so they kept a lot of the same functions and such, except the help button.
Right. Help button is gone. Yep.
But they did a very interesting thing. And I've gotten to know the owner, Jack. He's actually a very nice guy. But he's not a synth nerd, but he runs the company, and he knows how to run a company and keep the lights on with salaries paid. And he listens to his employees. And he has some very smart people there. And at one point, they recognized they need to have a more powerful platform. And so, like Apple did, and a lot of other companies do, they changed to these more powerful ARM chips and software based on the Linux operating system, which really works out well because, otherwise you're writing all this other code and debugging it, and the operating system has that stuff ready.
Yeah.
So and also they changed to a large touchscreen. On most of the MPC models, it's 7-inch touchscreen, and then on the high-end one, they have a 10-inch touchscreen. And you'd think, geez, by today's standards, those are small screens, but you have to understand there's buttons all over the panel too.
Yeah, of course.
So you don't need to have soft buttons for everything if you've got hard buttons for everything. But I was very impressed. The way that they improved the code from my original code that was written for the MPC is remarkable. And what they did is you can do just about everything without ever stopping play. And in fact, I just released a video, and you can find it on my site, that is, or just if you go to my channel on YouTube, it's Roger Linn Design. I demonstrate how you can do a looping performance, which is something that I'm very interested in. You can create each individual track and even do audio as well. And then you can change to a different sequence without stopping. And then create another sequence, like a secondary, like a chorus part or verse and chorus part, and do all these things. And the third part, a fourth part, you can do as many sequences as you want, and then arrange them and manipulate them afterwards. And this whole thing can be done in performance without stopping, which I think is really powerful. In the original MPC, you couldn't change sequences after you recorded one. You had to stop and move memory around and change to the other one. And so I was surprised how good they had done it. And so originally I made a video saying I tried out an MPC, and I said, I was surprised. It was very good. You got like 200,000 views. And so I made 2 other videos on there about the MPC and my use of it, because I found I really enjoy using it. And so I think one of the things that I value is the idea of changing from the paradigm of people using products in a room, dark room, alone at home by themselves, to using things more in a performance format or with other people integrated together into an ensemble. And I think looping is one of the ways that people are doing that today, except for the fact they just can't sync together very well. Even though there are tools like MIDI Sync and Ableton Link, there's still this. People tend to do things by themselves. And so I'm hoping that more people in these looping performances, whether they're doing audio looping or things like the MPC or looping pedals, will use this sort of a format to maybe do more of a focus on live performance.
I have an interesting story with that. I don't know how many years ago this was now, but it's somewhere around 10 years ago. Akai worked with us, and we had original prototype of one of their first MPCs with a big screen on it, because we were running Windows 10, I think, on it at the time. It had a Nook inside as the performance piece, right? As the hardware. But it mostly ended up coming down to license, like whenever you have to deal with the business side of a company like ours, and it's kind of a challenge. But it was a super cool device, and it was nice to see the first touch screens out there and the first big screens on these devices.
I didn't realize that. So they first used Windows embedded.
It was full on Windows, and like Windows 10 embedded, which is the full desktop one. We had it on stage at one of our build events that year. It was a really fun thing.
Was it an ARM processor back then, Pete?
No, there was a x86 Nook, so 64-bit, something like that.
10 years ago.
Yeah, so that's what.
But sometime shortly after that, they must have made the decision to change to the ARM and Linux because that's a big change.
Yeah,
100%. Well, myself and Pete are pretty much elbow deep in ARM processors and Windows on ARM testing and development with the Qualcomm CPU. So this whole shift to ARM, even within the instruments themselves, is an interesting one for me, Roger. So that's great. I mean, there's instruments that have always had computers embedded, and the majority of them would be running Linux, even things like the Hartman Neuron. Back in what year was that, Pete? 2000.
I remember that, yeah.
2004, 2005. It just basically had like an Intel Celeron computer sitting in there running on Linux, So Linux and ARM, well, I mean, that's the whole Android environment in it, So, but we're myself and Pete are focused on the Windows on ARM, which is rapidly accelerating, and there is definitely some nice momentum there. So it's interesting that the hardware developers are actually using those ARM chips. They're probably more the mobile phone level, do you think, Pete? They wouldn't be Snapdragons.
They're not necessarily Snapdragons, but there are a lot of different ARM chip implementations out there that are super powerful. So like you can do a lot with these.
Yeah, I mean the chip in my new Samsung S25 is just insane. I think it's an 8-core, or might even be a 12-core. I'm like, what am I doing? I use my phone as a phone and a camera essentially. Yeah,
it's come a long way from being the old Acorn PCs that they had in the UK, right? So
yeah. Well, look, and it's good to hear that the MPC, it's actually evolved. So that is definitely evolutionary from your principal design and philosophy, behind the original MPC instruments. And it's good to hear that you're actually happy with the direction that Akai have taken it, because, there was that, we'll call it that left turn in the middle 90s there. And some of those later MPC products, like, no.
Well, yeah, there was actually some animosity at one point.
Yeah.
Somebody had interviewed me in a video interview, and they asked me about Akai, and that was right after I had some friction with Akai, right. And I said some things in that video, and then somebody else took out that 2 minutes and republished it, and then that one went viral.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
But actually, it wasn't. It was just something I said off the cuff at that time.
Yep.
But this is, water under the bridge.
Of course, they're gonna take it out of context, Roger. That's the whole thing about the internet's in it. Let's just take it out of context and blow it up. Oh boy!
If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There you go. All right. Well, guys, if you feel that, unless Roger wants to chat about anything else, or Pete, if you've got any questions for Roger.
No, I think we've learned a lot here. And mostly, Roger, I just wanted to really thank you for spending the afternoon here with us on this. So I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. All right, then. Well, let's tie this up then. And look, I'd like to thank both of you for your time and energy today. Roger, again, thank you very, very much. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And it's amazing that, you basically have your weekly get-togethers with, multiple other guests that we've had on. So it is a very, very small world. And you can, if you can, next time you're actually in front of any of those fellas, can you please say hi from myself and Pete?
My pleasure.
All right. Okay. With that, I think we can close this off. Okay. On to the next.